I've sat in this seat for 3 years. This morning I won't. What's next? You'll find out on this morning's Carolina People.
Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. We're at the Myrtle Beach Herald, and we're focusing on Carolina people. Have been all this week, but we got a little spin on it today. Our focus today is on James McGregor Everett.
Hey, Donald.
Thank you for being here.
It is. It is amazing.
Tell them what you said a few minutes ago about changing the chairs.
It's the strangest feeling in the world sitting here in this chair. It's nuts.
Well, let me explain to everyone what we decided to do a couple of weeks ago when we decided that 3 years was a great time to run Carolina People, and now would be a perfect time to end it on the 3rd year anniversary. That the last 2 days that Greg graciously allowed me to interview him, and graciously in this, I've been in the television business a little over 22 years, and this is the first time for me ever doing what I'm going to try to do.
Are you serious?
First time ever. I've been interviewed a couple of times, a few times on Carolina People.
Right.
First time that I've ever sat down and tried to interview anybody. So it's probably going to be a mess. Bear with me. We're going to let Greg do most of the talking. And Greg and I talked a little bit before we came on the air, and you agreed that we'd take day one, this first day, and we'd talk a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, sure.
And then tomorrow we would talk about Carolina, reminisce a little bit about Carolina People. Also, he's president of GE Media, about his ownership of the Fox affiliate here and his ownership of the Myrtle Beach Herald. But let's just get right into it. Now, I caught if you notice, it wasn't Greg, it was James McGregor Everett.
That's exactly
That's your name. McGregor, I guess, a surname. Tell us about your name. I'd like to start there.
My full name is James Douglas McGregor Everett. Of course, I probably didn't have that on anything that I may have sent you. That's right. My mother had a twin brother, James, who lives in Merle's Inlet. Jimbo, we know him as. He built an amazing home on the creek down on a little dirt road, Oree Drive, down in Merle's Inlet. A beautiful home. He was kind enough to let me get involved with him a few years ago in it, and it's been a treat. She has a twin brother, Jimbo, and has a younger brother, Douglas, who lives up in Durham. And of course, when she was pregnant with me back in the late 1970, I was born in January '71. She had to get also her maiden name in there, McGregor. So she wrapped in 3 names. My poor dad came out with one, Everett, which worked out well. But my mother grew up in Greensboro as a McGregor. She was the middle of 5 kids.
Okay, we'll get with her in a minute.
Yeah.
Before we do, let's talk a little bit about your siblings, if you would.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
You've got.
I've got an older and a younger brother. Both of them now in their 2nd week of law school at UNC Chapel Hill, which is amazing. Of course, I was always the one thought to be one who would attend law school, and I did. I had 1 year at Wake Forest Law School, which was a blast. I didn't do very well. But those 2 guys, amazing. One went to Harvard, my older brother Rob, and then quickly did work for a year as a comedy writer for Spy magazine in New York City, and then went down to little school in Monroe, Louisiana, which has probably been impacted pretty heavily recently. Left Monroe and has been in L.A., or had been in L.A. until a few weeks ago for, 12, 13 years in the greater Los Angeles area, teaching school. He's been a school teacher virtually since he got out of college, graduated in 1990, and is very excited now. He and his wife Elizabeth have their first child, Henry Lewis Everett. My younger brother Lewis Moore Everett is a Duke graduate. He got a master's there in Chapel Hill in teaching, and it also has been a school teacher with his wife, who he met in that master's program, Sherry Honeycutt Everett, and those 2 are now attending law school together, all at Chapel Hill. And it's so funny, growing up in Durham, our dad being a teacher there, a law professor at Duke, all of our college tuitions more or less being underwritten by Duke, because of Duke's salary to my dad, and of course being avid Blue Devil fans, and now both of them, those guys in particular, being avid Blue Devil fans, both of them being students at UNC law schools.
Do you see them often?
I don't get to see them as often as I'd like, absolutely not. My younger brothers come down here more in the last couple of years, since Emma Claire's birth in September of 2002. They've come down a lot more, he and his wife Sherry, than I'd ever seen him.
I'm put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Who will make the best attorney?
That's a great question. I think Rob would potentially do a lot better in a courtroom. I think both of them will probably stay out of the courtroom. Luke is probably is naturally more intelligent and could, I mean, both of them are brilliant guys, Harvard, Duke. That's a great question, Donald.
I was trying to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I thought I knew where you were going with that. I'll make sure they don't get copies of this. They both live in Durham now, so they won't be seeing it this morning or tomorrow morning. Although one may be coming down for Emma Claire's birthday this weekend. Hopefully, I can
we want to talk about her in a little bit.
Sure.
The before we get into your school and stuff, you know, you said you hinted on that you grew up in Durham. Tell us about that. Tell us your childhood.
Yeah, I tell you, Durham is an amazing city, and I went to a little private school out in Orange County, Chapel Hill's in Orange County, Hillsboro's in Orange County, out on the Durham and Orange County line. Great little school. Then went to big public high school, Jordan High School there, which was a great experience. But growing up in Durham, and of course growing up in our household, my parents, and well before my birth in December of '68, not long after the birth of my older brother, moved into an apartment, Holly Hill Apartments on LaSalle Street, a little street between two major thoroughfares, Irwin Road in Durham, where Duke Hospital is located, real popular road, kind of the center of the city of medicine, and Hillsborough Road, another heavily traveled road. In this little LaSalle Street, which houses a ton of apartments in Durham, a lot of people who've attended Duke or attended graduate schools in Durham have lived in Poplar Apartments, which have since been torn down. Much of them have been torn down. My family had owned them at one point. But Dad and my grandmother, his mother, and potentially his father, but at least he and his mother built this 104-unit complex, Holly Hill, and they completed it in '68. And then Dad moved in. He and my mom moved in. It was two apartments, two bedroom, 1.5 bath, and so they knocked out the walls. Fortunately, it was pretty structurally well done. Each of the many buildings in there had 8 units in each building. And so we're apartment A and B, and they've been there since December of '68. Pretty amazing. They're on the ground floor. We've got neighbors upstairs. We had one neighbor there upstairs from maybe '74 until just this past year, Veronica Keogh, who lived there, and she lived much of her life in New Jersey, and so kind of commuted, just kept this apartment in Durham because she loved the city of medicine, or Bull Durham, the city of tobacco, or whatever. It's got a lot of nicknames, I guess, all-American city. And then some other neighbors who came and went. Of course, on that front unit in apartment E up above us, a lot of different grad students coming through Duke lived in there. Very interesting. I can remember a series of them. And now, of course, since they've allowed pets in the complex, they've got dogs or cats upstairs. You can hear them clanging around all the time. And, of course, since Veronica's moved out, someone's clanging around in apartment F upstairs as well. So, fortunately, my poor parents, who've been there since '68. It's kind of amazing.
So you grew up with no pets or no dogs?
Oh yeah, we couldn't have any pets in the complex. It was against the rules, even owning the complex. Of course, didn't want to break the rules if no one else could do it. Of course, next door in the 600-1, 600-2, a building that was attached to ours but a separate entrance and all. My grandmother had moved in 1972, about a year and a half after her husband's death.
This is your mother's mother?
My father's mother. My father's mother, Robinson Everett's mother. And she moved in '72, so at that point she would have been in her late 70s. She was born in 1893, so she would have been in her late 70s, almost 80. She'd been a lifelong attorney there in Durham. And
having heard you interview your father on 3 different occasions, there's been a bunch of people. Now they're famous. I mean, like Ken Starr probably sit down at your dad's table.
Absolutely.
And looking back now, were you just like a kid, didn't care and just?
Oh yeah, I had no idea. Of course, Dad being a faculty member there at Duke at the law school since the early '50s. The numbers of students that would come through and graduate and then come back to visit. He's a very popular professor, very well liked by his students and well thought of. And so students come by all the time, of many of fame like Ken Starr and others. We think about folks who come to visit. And of course, oftentimes, as I grew later in life, you'd see these faces. They're still coming to visit the judge and his wife at Holly Hill Apartments, where they've lived for 37 years. And what are they doing living here still? I mean, you'd kind of see that, albeit they're so nonplussed about it and love living there at Holly Hill.
And knowing your father and meeting your he's a very modest man.
Oh, yeah.
And I assume just by the way you talk of the apartments, probably a modest home or modest apartment.
Yeah.
Well, you shared with me, and I for any other reason, I think it's very interesting, and I'd like to share it up. Your parents have never owned a washer or dryer.
Not since they've lived in Holly Hill Apartments for 37 years. That's right. They have not. The apartment was too small.
Did you have to do the laundry as a kid? I mean,
well, I don't want to put it on
with the quarters and stuff.
As a family, we absolutely did. I got to say, my mother was a full-time homemaker and taking care of us, raising us. So she would handle that a lot. She got some help one day a week. Somebody would come into the house, but for the most part, she was doing a lot of that. Yeah, fortunately, in our building, 600-1, and every other building, we skipped a building, there was in that building a washer dryer. But the folks from 600-2, the building next door, would have to come to our building or go to 600-3 to do their laundry. Right. So it could get a little harried sometimes when folks, you had to wait for, not only for the dryer or the washer cycle to end, but you had to wait for them to come get it out before you could get it in.
And that goes on today with your mom and dad.
Oh, yeah.
Still live in that same building.
In the same building, and hopefully not using the same washer dryers, right. But yes. Still using ones and putting quarters in. I mean, the benefit of owning the complex and essentially owning the machines is they can get those quarters back, but they still got to put them in. Absolutely, every week.
You hit a little bit about your grandmother. Before we talk about your grandmother, did you know your grandfather?
I did not. He died 3 months after I was born.
But hopefully now, since your brother did the research on
his diaries,
you'll get to know him. Well, your grandmother. Tell us about your grandmother. And I've heard you say this before, and I'll say this, and you start it off with this. You refer to her as your best friend.
She was definitely my best friend growing up.
That's.
She was my best friend growing up. She was an amazing woman. She potentially because I wasn't, didn't have it all together, maybe like my brothers. My two brothers went to a real prestigious private school in Durham, obviously did very well, and I was kind of cast out. Not that my parents would intentionally do that, but couldn't get in there, essentially. So I went to this other school out, and of course then to the public high school. But it was, she looked at me, I guess, in a different way, and I would get in a lot of trouble. For some reason, whether I was a middle child or not, I just would tend to get in a lot of trouble.
Serious trouble? Or
no, not serious trouble, but, just disobeyed my mother. My mother believed very strongly in the rod of correction, scripturally or not. She believed very strongly in spankings with a switch. We'd go pick a switch. She'd tear me up, but it was all for a good cause. In the long run, I'm thankful as anything that she did it now. I just didn't want to obey her on anything. She'd say, do A, I do B. And there were examples, even as young as 2 or 3. I know part of one of my toes was almost chopped off at one point and re-sewn back on because big Coke bottles were dropped out in the front yard out on the pavement. And she said, stay right here, I'm going to go get a broom. And she comes out, and I'm standing down in the Coke bottles. So it's amazing just not obeying my mother at an early stage, which is something I had to learn with. And my grandmother somehow sheltered me. My father went on the bench in 1980, so I guess I was 9, and commuted to Washington every week. So not only was my mother taking care of the 3 of us, but also her mother-in-law lived next door and ate meals with us every night. Every night. So not only did she take care of her 3 sons, but her very pioneering mother-in-law who, she looks at her daughter-in-law as you're a homemaker and I'm a professional woman. Not necessarily. Obviously, she'd been a homemaker as well during the time when my dad was growing up, but she just took a great fondness to me. And I'm sure at some point later in life, potentially around the time of my grandmother's death, it was tough for my brothers to recognize that we had such a strong bond. I would walk her home every night, put her in bed. there's some great instances, great memories. My first diary back in 1988 was purchased by her when I was 17. We were down in Wilmington. She'd received the Albert Schweitzer Award the year before in 1987 there in Wilmington. Some fascinating folks. F. Murray Abraham, who starred in the Amadeus at Salieri there, and some other, Mary Martin and others who came in around the same time when she won that award. And we came back the next year to highlight it with Katharine Graham and others. And we bought that diary, and I remember her saying, "This is the diary of a growing boy," which was a great thing. I remember $21. I bought a little art museum there in Wilmington. Think of great experiences. There was one time, and I would, as I said, get into trouble later in high school. For some reason, I had gotten a driver's license or something that enabled me to get liquor. 18 was the drinking age. It may have been 21 even at that time. And I started selling liquor at school to kids. I would just, pour out half the Coke and then fill it with Jack Daniels or something, and made some really good money at an early age. But my Uncle Doug told my mom about it. She poured out all these half gallons of liquor. And I never knew what would happen to my grandmother, and my grandmother asked my mother, and I remember asking for those empty half gallons of liquor. I couldn't figure out what it was all about. I later figured out, because whenever I'd go over to tuck her in at bed at night, I would always close the blinds at her window, and there were these empty half gallons of liquor. I mean, empty bottles sitting in her window.
Just to
remind me. And she kept them there for a long time. Even when I went off to college, I think it was during my freshman year, she finally pulled them down. I couldn't be there to tuck her in every night, I guess. She thought, what am I doing with these empty half gallons of liquor? But it was a great reminder, a great tacit, quiet punishment. I'm sure from my mom I got spanked, and from her I got a potentially even more severe punishment.
When did she pass away?
January 28, 1992, during my junior or senior year of college. Yeah.
Did she want you to be an attorney? I mean, had you and her discussed that? Or
we had talked about the law. That's a great question. I don't have vivid memories of that. I spent a lot of time with her on Sundays after church. We'd go to her law office in downtown Durham on Main Street, and actually around Christmas time before her death, literally within 6 weeks of her death, we made her last visit to her law office together after church.
Now, she was a trial attorney. She
did a lot of work out of the office, but yes, she did some trial work.
Did you ever get an opportunity to see her?
I never did. She did a lot more in office later in life. Again, in 1972, she would have been in her late 70s. I was born in 71, so, but when she moved into Holly Hills, she was probably 80.
About your parents, and we'll start with your mother. Tell us about your mother.
Again, the middle of 5 kids. She was probably 30 minutes, came out of the womb 30 minutes before her twin brother Jimbo, the one who lives in Merle's Inlet. And she was an amazing gal. Went to Chapel Hill. And she started at Women's College there, or now UNC Greensboro. And often at that point, I don't think women could start at Chapel Hill unless they lived in Chapel Hill or were the child of a faculty members. So I think everyone had to come in from other schools for the junior and senior year. Her twin brother was there. She got in and enjoyed it. Later moved to Durham, did some teaching, was working at American Tobacco, I believe, when she met my dad at church. Both of them were there with dates, and they met in a setting like that. It was for a couples night, and they somehow hit it off. I believe that's the story. Married 3 to 4 months later. You may have heard my dad talk about that a month or so ago, and he said it was kind of a surprise. Or maybe my younger brother Luke shared that from my grandfather's diaries. It was kind of a surprise they moved so fast to marry. But her mother's still living, my grandmother, Grace McGregor, in Greensboro, in a little retirement village there. Did an amazing job raising 5 kids.
Well, in a minute we're going to talk about your daughter, Emma Claire, but
yeah.
I wanted to bring that up. But before we move to your father, give me one trait of your mother that you hope that will pass along to Emma Claire.
That's a great question, Donald. Golly, a trait of my mother that I hope will pass on to Emma Claire. I'm not the most pensive person. I don't necessarily think of a lot of things, and that is a great question. I'm prayerfully hopeful that her ability to stand firm on principle and what she knows is right, which has always happened with my mother. I really hope my daughter, Emma Claire, will stand firm with what she knows is right.
Tell us about your father.
Dad was the only child and born in 1928, March 18th, and was a child prodigy. Earlier this week, we were talking about Delaney and her horsework on Monday. Dad, an amazing, he skipped 3rd grade, he skipped 8th grade, and he skipped 11th grades at Durham High School. They, at that time, had state exams, and he was the top scorer in 4 or 5 categories of a series of exams of Latin and history. He came in second in one. I remember a story written about him in the Durham. Reading a story later, that said if athletics or academics had Player of the Year awards like sports do, then this guy would win them in every sport because he just cleaned it up statewide. He then went off to a little prep school for a year at Phillips Exeter, and then started at Harvard. Was #1 in his class at age 16 at Harvard. He was the Wendell Scholar. He did summer school, so he finished Harvard a year early, and then he went into law school, and he ended up 4th in a class of 445, was on law review there. He played some JV basketball at Harvard. He's 6'4", 6'5", so he kind of walk on at that time. He's probably a giant back then. If you remember him a couple weeks ago, I think he was 22 when he started teaching at Duke Law School his first year, taught for that 1 year, left 5 years, then came back. But a gentle giant, loved by many. Really, he was pretty sizably overweight at one point, but has trimmed down a little bit. He's probably 260 or so, and just an incredible intellect.
We only got about 5 minutes left, and we want to step right into about you being a father.
Yeah.
But before we go there, what is something about your father that you hope that you can take with you for Emma Claire?
The amazing love of people. I sure hope Emma Claire will see that in me, and I hope that she'll have that same thing. Again, from my mother, standing on principle. My father's a very principled man, but he loves people more than anything. Really works hard to get their names right, to remember them, and if he doesn't remember them after having met them before, he frets about it.
For the people that don't know, you're a single father.
Yeah.
Raising a fixing to be 3-year-old.
She'll be 3 on Sunday, right. This Sunday.
Very quickly, in a couple, tell us about being a father before we talk about Emma.
It's been the greatest thing in the world. The birth of Emma Claire and her life, and the involvement in her life. She just started a little preschool down in Surfside recently, and just being able to be with some other kids now. She's been kind of a one-on-one with a couple of folks over the last couple of years. It's amazing. There's nothing like it. It's the greatest thing in the world. I remember I'm so thankful being with you when I first saw her that same day, and hearing you talk certain things about your relationship with your daughter and the excitement. And I think about other people not being able to explain, using words like inexplicable, of their relationship with their children or what they do for their children. All of them, whether it's their first or their 7th child. Of course, Emma Claire is my one and only, but I never thought I'd have any children in the foreseeable future, when she was born almost 3 years ago. And it's been the greatest joy of my life, absolutely.
And we'll wrap it up. We've only got a couple minutes now. We'll wrap it up with this. Your involvement with Carolina people, from the people you've interviewed, will it make you a better father? Will it make you appreciate what you have? And I don't know if it's so much of a question, but maybe something just to start you off. Tell us about how lucky you are with Emma Claire.
Oh yeah, I can't. One of our first interviews early on, we did a tech week on tech schools. There was a guy who came in from Bennettsville. I can't remember his name, anything about him, but he was in from Bennettsville, and he had 3 daughters. Hearing him talk about changing diapers, this was as Emma Claire was a couple months old, changing diapers, and those experiences that he'd never forget and that he would never want to pass up. And the experiences of working on rashes and changing diapers and giving her baths and getting in the bathtub with her and doing things it has been amazing. Of course, the interaction with people, parents oftentimes, but even folks without children, talking about either the desires to have children or not. The experience to be able to share about her life and see her grow. And of course, Emma Claire was born with a cleft palate and at a very dangerous stage early on. We had a cleft palate repair done, fortunately at Duke. And she got this big hole in her stomach. She's kind of got 2 belly buttons. And we talk about that a little bit. If other folks, point it out or otherwise, she said, it's my scar. The doctor did it. Yeah. The doctor did it. And of course, she's wearing glasses now. She's got pretty bad eye problems. We're about to have a little surgery to straighten out a wandering eye, and those are little things. You start worrying now at age 3 about going under anesthesia. You've got to be real sensitive, but she's incredibly resilient. She's 40 inches tall now at age 3 and 42 and a half pounds, soon to be age 3, excuse me.
How often does she stay with you?
She's with me half the week. She's with her mother 2 nights during the week, and with me 2 nights during the week, and then with me 1 weekend and with her mother the next weekend. She has a brother and sister. Her mother has 2 other children. So she is fortunate enough to have Nicholas and Meredith in her life, and her mother Tisha is an amazing influence for her. She looks a lot like her mother. I'd like to take credit for her. Thank the Lord she doesn't look like me, but she does have some features that are much like mine, eyes or otherwise. She's an amazing girl. Yeah, she's everything.
But if you see her going after a liquor bottle and start pouring it in one and running around the neighborhood,
I'll know where she got that.
This has been enjoyable. Now we're going to do it again tomorrow morning.
Can I come back tomorrow?
I'd love to have you.
Wow,
it's really been a joy.
Donald,
thank you. And we'll be back with Greg Everett and more Carolina People. Well, I hope you got a little insight of one of my dearest friends, Greg Everett, today. He's promised to come back tomorrow. We're going to get more into the business side of him, but he talked a little bit about his business early on, selling liquor. I can't wait for tomorrow. Please join us with Greg Everett, Carolina People.